Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Again, on behalf of my colleagues at the Blockchain Association, welcome to another one of our sessions. We are, at Blockchain Association, a 100-plus member company in Washington, D.C., as the primary interface between the federal government and our emerging and tremendous industry. And today, we're talking about something that is really on the minds, I think, of lawmakers and others in D.C., public networks and public good, the positive social impacts of crypto, and the stories and anecdotes and achievements behind that. I'm going to turn it over to my great colleague, Marissa Tashman-Koppel, to introduce our panel and get things going.
Thanks, Dave. Excellent MC. I'm Marissa Tashman-Koppel. I'm BA's Policy Counsel, and I am very excited to be moderating this panel. The positive social impact of crypto is actually what got me bought into this industry, so particularly excited to be here with all of you. And I would love to start by just having each of you guys introduce yourselves and give a brief overview of the projects that you're representing and how it relates to the positive impact of crypto. Kurt, go for it.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Kurt Opsahl. I am the General Counsel at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I'm also on the advisory board of the Filecoin Foundation and of the Open Archive. So these are some of the projects that I've been working on. Trying to find places for civil liberties to thrive in a decentralized system, so we can take advantage of open systems, of permissionless systems, in order to break some of the molds of a centralized space and allow people to choose things which will offer them greater freedom, greater privacy, without having a centralized point of failure.
See if the thing's on. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Vavchuk. I'm the General Counsel at Alliance. We are a Web3 crypto accelerator and incubator, venture funds, and we're launching a Founders DAO in the new year. I got into this space not for decentralized finance, although that's a huge part of my focus, but because I believe that crypto can replace bureaucrats and administrators and lawyers like myself. I believe that it's technology that can automate a lot of the middleware in our society, and I think that's an incredibly valuable function. Working in this space, and in particular with Alliance, gives a lot of visibility into the technologies that are being made and helps us steer that in that direction a little bit. So excited to be here, excited to be here with Blockchain Association in particular.
Test? Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Anna Stone. Thank you to CES and the Blockchain Association for inviting us. I'm here on behalf of eToro, which is the world's largest social trading network that enables people in countries all over the world to access stocks, equities, crypto, commodities. But in addition to working with eToro, I am a true believer in the transformational power of crypto and blockchain networks to actually change the paradigm upon which we think about this big word of impact, if you will. I've been building in the crypto space for over 5 years with a particular focus on how do we actually bring this open financial infrastructure to the people who are the most underserved by our current financial services systems, particularly the 1.7 billion unbanked around the world and the 5.5 billion underbanked around the world, and how open public networks such as crypto fundamentally change the paradigm around how we think about financial access and financial services. To this end, I'm one of the founding members of a project called Good Dollar, which is a crypto universal basic income project, currently the largest UBI experiment in the world with over 500,000 members from 180 countries. We distribute free crypto every day to these people, and it's incredible to see people all over the world begin to use this money in a truly productive fashion to improve their lives and actually have more money to do more good things. Thanks very much.
Hi, and thank you as well to CES and the Blockchain Association. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Sandy Carter, and I am an SVP with Unstoppable Domains and the founder of Unstoppable Women of Web3. So Unstoppable Domains provides digital identity for you to travel throughout Web3 and the metaverse. Our project is really about putting data back in the hands of the users. So instead of that data being given to large companies, entities, or countries, that data is owned by you. And therefore, you decide who gets it, when they get it, how much they get as we move forward. In addition, I founded something called Unstoppable Women of Web3. I founded this for more inclusive environment for Web3, blockchain, and the metaverse. We have now over 180 companies that are part of it, including eToro, as well as the Blockchain Association. I'll have to get these two lawyers engaged as well. And our mission is to train women globally. We just launched an initiative for 5 million Latinos, and we've trained over 49,000 women on Web3, metaverse, and blockchain so far. And again, thanks for having me here today.
So I'd like to start by just sort of setting the foundation a little bit. The title of this panel is Public Networks and Public Goods. So maybe, Anna, you could talk a little bit about what the public means, especially with regard to public goods. I think there's many ways we can define that, but how would you define it here?
Sure. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the term public goods, and traditionally we think of public goods as things that we all share and experience in the real world, right? The water that we drink, the air that we breathe, the road, and then on state level, infrastructure, government, the roads that we drive on, etc. And I think when we're thinking of public goods within a digital context, we need to think of how do public goods translate for an inherently digital universe, if you will. And in many ways, open source code is not a new concept, but in many ways, these are the public goods of the internet, right? The internet email protocols that we enjoy today, these are public goods that we all enjoy, and then different companies can build the application layer on top of, right? And when we are now thinking about public networks in a blockchain era, in many ways, blockchains themselves, I see them inherently as public goods, right? So the Bitcoin network is a great example, but so is the Ethereum network, which is actually open source software that is designed so that other people are able to build on top of it, contribute to it, organize around it, and benefit from it, right? And so this takes the form of code, it takes the form of documentation, it takes the form of community activation, but ultimately, what makes Ethereum exist is not any one company that's doing anything. It's actually that there are thousands of different contributors to this network, which is designed to function as a public good. What's really interesting is that because blockchains and cryptos have financial components that are native to them, they also have a way to answer the question of, okay, how do you pay for this? How do you pay for funding a public good at scale? And I think when we look at the blockchain networks that exist so far, we are able to realize that this payment element is actually one of the areas that has really where public goods have struggled in the past, right, is the question of who's going to pay for all these things, who's going to pay to maintain the environment, most specifically, right? And so there's also been a lot of discussion, I think, around how do we, on an infrastructure layer, on a protocol layer, leverage these technologies, leverage these incentives in such a way that we can actually create more sustainable, systemic funding mechanisms, not just to protect the public networks, but also translating that into funding the public goods that we experience in the real world as well.
Thank you. Also, if any of you want to jump in with thoughts, feel free. That doesn't have to be the back and forth. Mike, I
can hop in for a second. I think it's an excellent point that one of the big points of tension with public goods is how do you pay for them, right? And traditionally, we've had states being the main providers of public goods. And so really the way that that's done is tax dollars, right? But there's a fundamental problem with states versus like free market entities that are subject to a profit motive, that are subject to market pressures, is you get mismanagement, you get bloat, you get poor governance, right? And what crypto introduces, not only on the financial side, but if you look into DAOs and you look into other ways that decentralized protocols are governed, it offers an alternative method of managing and governing these protocols that we're only now starting to see massive amounts of experimentation and might not be subject to the same failure modes that we see in states. So it's an exciting opportunity to not only find new ways for public goods to support themselves, but also to rid them of a lot of the problems of public governance that we've seen in the past.
Kurt, how do you think that that can protect civil liberties in the digital ecosphere?
Well, a lot of the ways in which I think crypto and blockchain technologies, Web3, can be useful for civil liberties is creating the space where people can choose to go to a site that is focused to fight for the user, that is built privacy by design from the get-go, and they don't have to go to a centralized organization and stay within the walled garden. And for some, the walled garden is where they want to be. It's they appreciate the trade-offs there, but then they get locked in. And if those trade-offs change, if their privacy gets endangered, both from commercial privacy issues, where consumer privacy, where they're getting marketed to in the ways that they don't like, but also just they want to be left alone. They want to have their information available to all comers or to governments around the world. And giving them that choice to get out of the walled gardens, to pick a place that is built and verifiable to be secure, to be private, to be a place which fits with their values, that can really enhance things for the users.
If I could pitch in there, one of the projects that we're doing is around digital identity. And if you think about your digital identity and your data, for me that is not just a civil right, it's a basic human right. So if we think today, like how does it work today? Well, today your digital identity is really associated or linked to an application. So when you log into, let's say, Facebook, or you log into TikTok, all of that data that's associated with the way you logged in is owned by that company or entity or country if you're dealing with it that way. And that means that now they have the right to leverage and use that data. And you can think about, really funny examples, like my husband and I we're from Texas, so we were going to a Texas party in California. In the car, we were chatting about what should we wear, like what boots, what hat. And when we got home, I had all these advertisements from Facebook for Stetson hats and Roper boots. And you kind of laugh about it, like, oh, wow, they monetize that really fast. But then when you think about something more serious, like a friend of mine, his son has a very serious illness. When he found out, he went home and he Googled about it because he wanted to learn how he could support his son. Well, almost immediately, he started getting emails on new health insurance, new natural remedies. So before he even had a chance to share it with his friends and his family, that data was out there. I don't think that's the way this should be. I think that data that is about us belongs to us and should be used by us. And that's why I love building on the blockchain and Web3, because when you have a digital identity in Web3, that data is owned by you. And now you use that digital identity to sign into multiple applications, and any of that data that's gathered is stored on the chain that is owned by you. So for me, when I think about civil rights and human rights, this data issue, especially in the new digital world, is such a very important one.
Definitely. I think you brought up, the main tenet of Web3 and how it shifts the power back to the individual and to communities. I think on a good dollar would probably be such a great example to talk about in how Web3 can do this, and crypto too.
Yeah, sure. So I think First of all, one comment in listening to everyone talk is that we've covered such a wide breadth of topics already, right? We've talked already about all of these issues that we really care about as individuals and as communities and societies that happen to be the issues that we really struggle with. The environment, privacy, poverty, opportunity, and access. And I think what makes crypto interesting, and the reason why we're on this panel right now, is because we realize that across all of these different areas, there is the potential for us to break the existing paradigm and to do something better, right? And I think as related to underserved communities, I work specifically in the space of financial inclusion and trying to let money flow to the places where it's actually going to be used the most productively, right? We know that despite the theories of economics, capital does not always flow to the places where it is the most productive. There are inefficiencies all of the time. And so the output of that is that actually in the places that need money the most, those last mile destinations, money is the most expensive, the less accessible it is. And so the concept behind Good Dollar is actually how can you create free money as a public good that is going to be used productively by the people who are the most in need of it, right? And so the way we do this is we actually leverage the financial infrastructure of the decentralized financial infrastructure on Ethereum, where there is tons and tons of money out there. The question is, how are you going to structure it in a way that it flows to people who are going to use it productively? And so at Good Dollar, we distribute cents on the dollar every day, right? Cents on the dollar. But that money is flowing to people who otherwise have no access to passive income or US dollar-based currencies all over the world, which is sometimes easy to forget when we're sitting here in Las Vegas, right? That there's many, many people out there who really lack any money, right? One thing we do all understand, though, is that we all have so much more to contribute and so much more value to add than simply the money that we have in our bank accounts, right? And I think the whole concept behind a Good Dollar UBI project is how through giving people money as a tool that they can begin to use and collaborate around, are they able to unlock a lot of that human potential, right? And so so some of the examples that we have now that we've been doing this for a few years is that we see that in markets that are defined as financially underserved, we're talking about Zambia, we're talking about Nigeria, we're talking about Argentina, et cetera, people are able to use the good dollars that they are receiving and to begin to build real life productive businesses on top of that for their own communities, right? So the people are taking their good dollars and opening up airtime shops where they serve as an airtime provider for people in their community to use their good dollars to actually cash out, right? Or people are able to create secondhand shops. There's a woman entrepreneur in Brazil who has opened a secondhand shop that it sells goods and services, handiworks, et cetera, for good dollars. And I think when it comes to underserved communities, this is where this concept of capital formation and the ability of Web3 to actually enable people to, one, reach systems like this, but two, permissionlessly begin to use them and leverage them for their own benefit, that's where things get really empowering, really exciting. I'll also note that 99% of the conversation around crypto in the media and DeFi is not focused on this topic, right? But this is where the transformational power is. It's not in the ability to recreate on steroids the same financial products that we have in our existing financial system. It's actually based on how can we use this technology and the financial primitives that it creates to enable us to do new things. And I think that's where we need to focus the conversation as an industry, because otherwise we really lose, we risk losing the plot entirely.
You're okay if I add in? Okay. So I agree with Anna. And one of the things that I find is that in order for something like this to start and to be widespread and to hit more inclusive groups is you have to know about it. You have to be educated on it. And so it's interesting to talk about it and say, let's hit the people who know about it. But one of the reasons we started Unstoppable Women of Web3 is there aren't enough women and diverse groups who understand what crypto is, what blockchain is, what Web3 is, what the metaverse is. If you look overall, the statistics will say about 8% of women are aware and know about it, which means they're not going to apply for the jobs. Because, women want to have 100% of job qualifications. Guys could do 40% and they're okay, but women need 100%. And so I think a lot of this, it starts with providing the elements to get to financial, but I think you have to back it up and say, do you understand the power of what this can bring into the market? We're starting to work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and one of the things we're finding is that women, a study was done for women or female founders in the Web3, metaverse, blockchain, crypto space. They are 15% more profitable than their male counterparts, but they're 40% less likely to be funded. So I think we have to start back with education to get more women and diverse groups inside of this space, and then make sure that we're providing that funding so they can start businesses, and then leverage, good dollars, et cetera, to make them successful.
For me, I think one of the things that really drew my interest was that power of the community. And I think part of the education, really drives home that it's woven into the fabric of Web3. And I think DAOs in particular, decentralized autonomous organizations embody that mission of promoting the community so perfectly. Mike, you probably live in DAO world all day, every day. So I'd love to just hear from you on how DAOs in particular can really harness that power of the community.
Yeah, DAOs are a tricky topic, especially lately, because it's very difficult to define, what is and is not a DAO. For some folks, it literally just means an on-chain or online cooperative, so a shared management of a treasury. And for others, they would argue Bitcoin in its totality is a DAO, is an organization that of users and managers and developers of a protocol. And so what's interesting about DAOs and the way that I always try to think about it is states really control corporations. So all corporations that exist are subordinate to the states that create them. And so there's this concept in political theory called legibility, where states can make legible reality, so they can see people doing a thing together in a group, and they're like, okay, this is a business enterprise, we're going to attach this sort of structure onto it, and we're going to make sure that you give us our taxes, and that you provide the right protections to workers, and what have you. And then there's big amorphous groups like the punk rock scene that aren't really legible to states. But if you think of a punk rock scene, you can think of, identifiable members. You can think of sources where they gather, like bars or record labels or fashion labels. The income in the organization of those organizations is centralized in those small areas. What DAOs, I think, allow people to do, and how I conceptualize it, is it allows you to create a protocol, a system of governance, a system of coordination within those more amorphous scenes, and start keeping some of the value in there, start coordinating the labor within there in a way that wasn't possible before. And so if you can imagine a lot of the more, disparate groups that exist around, particular social justice causes or identity groups that are, far-flung and spread out, but now they have a new means of coordinating their behavior and of generating economic wealth that exists within that organization. So that's one conception of DAOs that I like to put out that's non-techie, non-financial. But then you also have, going back to Bitcoin, you have means of creating these public goods, these public networks, and managing them in a collective fashion, which without the state, right? So I was talking about corporations earlier, but even cooperatives, even other ways that we've managed public goods outside of direct government control still exist within the subordinate relationship to the overarching, government structure. So if we're worried about creeping authoritarianism, and if you look at the news, left, right, and center, we're all worried about creeping authoritarianism and encroachments on civil liberties. Having a means of coordinating, having a means of organizing yourself that isn't necessarily subordinate to the state at the organization level is a massive potential power unlock to underserved, underprivileged, oppressed, dissident groups that we didn't have before. So that's how I think of DAOs on a much more, broad scale, as opposed to on the, it's strictly on the financial or, JPEG clubs or any of the other stuff you might have heard about. I think it's a much more powerful technology that we're only now scratching the surface of, both in the for-profit and, nonprofit context. Although if you read anything that I write on Twitter, I'm really trying to erode that distinction. I think crypto allows us to erode that distinction. Payment for public goods and revenue sources to support public goods can be profitable, and that can go back into the scene with the tokens and the economies that you're generating. So I think we'll see a lot more creative exploration of how groups can coordinate their wealth, their behavior, without needing to resort to these state-granted and state-controlled mechanisms.
And I think maybe the main thing that it's so key in order to make sure that decentralized organizations and decentralized networks can flourish and there could be more innovation is protecting the ability to write code and the ability to organize and freely associate. And I know Kurt's life work is dedicated to protecting that. So what are the main threats to that? And then how EFF in particular, or how do you think we can all work to make sure that those threats aren't actualized?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think this is an important aspect of it. Is these communities get together and they get together in order to achieve some of their political and social means, like they are expressing themselves through the code as a way of putting the values out onto the world and associating with people who believe in that. And I also want to point out in terms of these communities that it is in some sense much more than just getting some financial rewards through a token, but also putting out a set of values of trying to make a better world through these technologies, putting it out there, making it available to all, making their code open and available. And as part of that expression that is trying to inspire people to contribute, to participate, but that expression has to be protected. And that's one of the things that we've been fighting at EFF for decades. Code is speech, for the notion that you are expressing yourself by putting the code out there, and that if a government wants to come and say, this code can't be published, it can't go out there, try to put the regulations on it, it has to go through the protections of speech, the speech tests, where the government has to show and overcome these tests in order to infringe upon that, and with the notion that you have a right to publish and put the code out there. And this does come under fire. I mean, I think sometimes governments don't like to have certain code out there, and it came up, in the 90s. It came up very strongly with encryption in the first place. Encryption had been thought of as a military technology for spies and armies, and it was regulated as a munition. And then I think at that point a grad student, now a professor, put out Snuffle, an open source encryption program that provided stronger encryption than the government wanted to have available to the public. And so they wanted to shut that down and say that no, because if you make it available to all, then it can be exported, it can be available to people overseas. And of course, it is good for everybody to have strong encryption. This is a good thing, and making that source code, publishing it, and being available is an expression of that value, that we all should have access to strong encryption to keep our privacy, to keep ourselves secure and protected. So I think that it's very important to have the value of being able to publish. But you also mentioned association. I think that's another very important right about this, which is to be able to get together with like-minded people so that together you can do more than each of you can do on your own. And yes, you want to empower the users, and that's very important of it, but you also want to empower the users to be able to empower themselves by getting together with other users and fighting for what they think is right, putting it out there and building something, and having that right to come together, to organize, and to do it with the minimum of government interference, so that the creeping authoritarianism can't come in and shut down a project that's going to protect and preserve civil liberties.
And on the flip side of that, what are some examples of projects that have utilized that permissionless free protocol layer in order to create positive social impact? Like, what are some actual use cases?
So one of my favorites is the Liquidity protocol. This is a stable coin that has zero governance, so it's an entirely autonomous protocol where you deposit your Ethereum, and it's over collateralized, so I think it's like 110%. And then you can withdraw LUSD, which is a stable coin that operates the way that most stable coins do. And so what's unique about a fully autonomous and permissionless stable coin as opposed to, and I'm not knocking, the Tethers or USDCs of the world, but you have the stable coin, the US dollar itself as a technology is simply one of the most valuable and important means of wealth storage around the world. And there's so many people that don't have, as was mentioned before, that are underbanked or unbanked, and having access to the U.S. dollar when you live in places like Venezuela is a completely transformational way for you to hold on to your family's wealth, and for you to or for people in the States who are sending remittances back home to ensure that middlemen, intermediaries are not excuse me, are not able to interfere with that. And so what we do see in crypto is, the United States and Europe and the developed countries that are, having fun on DeFi get a lot of the attention, but countries like, Vietnam, India, Pakistan, Kenya, Nigeria are all higher than the United States, according to, I think it was in 2021, Chain Analysis did a study, or they released a survey, and found that crypto use was much higher in those countries than even the United States. And so I think that tells you something, because all those countries have, maybe not all of them, but most of them have terrible banks. A lot of them have horrific monetary authorities. And so a permissionless stablecoin is something that is, I think, a really great example of a permissionless technology for public good.
Two examples. I think one example of real progress that was made is actually thinking a few months back to the completion of the Ethereum merge, actually moving from proof of work to proof of stake. So this was an upgrade that happened on the Ethereum blockchain several months ago that was the result of hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals, working in a distributed way to fundamentally change the consensus mechanism of the Ethereum blockchain, motivated by the desire to reduce the emissions of Ethereum. And through making this upgrade, they were able to reduce, I don't know the specific number, I think it's over 90%, reduce the environmental impact of the Ethereum blockchain. And this is, I think, one of the coolest examples of distributed coordination of different groups coming together to actually do something with the stated goal of environmental sustainability and having a positive impact. So that's one example that I like to think about. The other example is projects like Good Dollar are not alone. There are many other projects that are out there, builders, entrepreneurs that are thinking about what are the models for how crypto-native economies or decentralized economies can actually fund public goods. The team behind Gitcoin is an example of a group that's been working on this for many, many years and they've actually really popularized this concept of quadratic funding, right? So quadratic funding is a concept where the money will actually flow to the places transparently that have the best results, whatever you define those results to be, right? And so this provides a new way to think about how do we distribute aid? How do we distribute philanthropy? How do we ensure that those funds are flowing to the places where it's used the most impactfully and productively? And really trying to create some real thought leadership and models around what could business models for funding public goods really look like in a crypto-native economy. And I'm inspired by that all the time.
I want to highlight another project that's trying to help protect human rights, I guess, in a little bit of a different way, which is Starling Labs. And they are using a decentralized Web3 system in order to preserve very important records about human rights violations in Ukraine. where we have, an authoritarian government, certainly in the Russian-controlled sections, that absolutely does not want to have this information to be made available to anyone, let alone placed in a permanent storage location where it can be cryptographically verified and could be later used in war crime trials. And this allows for a system that is outside of the ability of the Russian government to stop and control it getting out to the world and being preserved. And then when there will hopefully be accountability for human rights violations, having a set of information, photos and other evidence of this information that has been cryptographically secured, shown that it came from the region that it came from, show that it was made at a particular time, and preserved on a record will be invaluable.
I think the last example that I'll give is two projects for Black blockchainers. One is called Black Blockchain Association, and the other is the African Leadership Group. Both of those are looking at the future of technology. By 2035, most of the technologists will live in Africa. And so both of these groups are fighting for, because Africa and Africans will have such skill sets there, they don't want them to be left behind in some of the most important ones, like blockchain, for example. One of the things they just published was some of the work that they've been doing on organizing DAOs in this space. And it's really interesting to me, the USA Today just published some of their results. So today, about 11% of people who classify themselves as white leverage or use crypto. For the first time, those who qualify themselves as Black or African American are at 23% of the population who are using or leveraging crypto. So I found that this is really interesting as a project to see how this group of typically disadvantaged individuals want to make sure that they're not left behind in this new era, but that they're leading the pack as we move forward.
Just to add on to what Sandy says, there's numerous studies out there that show that crypto is actually the most diversely held asset class, hard stop. And it's because that's not by accident. It's because actually for most people in the world to go and buy a piece of Apple stock or go to buy some Microsoft or whatever the case may be, it is not accessible, but you can do that through Bitcoin. You can have access to Ethereum. You don't have to have a bank account and pass all of the KYC requirements, et cetera, to get into crypto. And so it's not an accident that it's the most widely held asset class. It's actually by its design.
Right, there's actually higher numbers of Hispanics than whites who hold crypto. LGBTQ, there's 25% of that population. So Anna's absolutely right. If you look at all the numbers, it is the most diverse out there today.
It's a critical point that I want to underline is the code doesn't care who you are, right? Like the system where we have intermediaries like banks or governments that evaluate you, right, in order to get a loan. They dig through your history, you have your credit score, you have all these things. A lot of this is incredibly opaque, and a lot of this is incredibly arbitrary. The person sitting across from you is making judgments about you. The institution into which you're walking is making judgments about you. You might have been people that look like you, people that act like you, people that believe as you do might have been excluded from these spaces. Code don't care. Right? So you can look at the if you replace a bank with smart contracts, which is something a lot of people have done, I can explain that briefly, where instead of giving my money to an intermediary bank, and they're like, okay, I'll give you 3% interest on that, and I'll loan it out at 5%, right? There's a bunch of people coming to the bank, gets pooled into one pocket that is then loaned out discretionarily from the bank, the bank's decision-making authority. You instead have code on the blockchain that says you put your coins into this wallet address, and then you can verify that the code will algorithmically, automatically pay you the interest rate so long as certain thresholds are met, and you can review those. You can look at the documentation yourself if you're not able to. There are organizations that are increasingly growing that are making this documentation more accessible, helping people navigate these places. And you can then access it permissionally with the comfort that you know how this works, you know what the risk factors are, and there's no one there arbitrarily saying like, well, people like you tend not to pay back loans, so we're not going to let you into the building. That isn't going to happen. And so you have access to these financial tools that you didn't have before because code don't care.
This is what gets me really fired up. So I loved all of these answers. We only have a few minutes left, but I would love to close with another question that probably will also get me fired up. What is like the vision or the goal that each of you keep in mind in your work day to day? Kurt, you want to?
Yeah, I'll thank you. I'll bring that. I think it is a couple of things. I guess there's a bunch of things. Is one, fighting for the user. That at the root of what we're doing is looking at the interests of the user and trying to fight so that they have empowerment, so they can make good choices, and they have good choices to make. Another, keep it secret, keep it safe. It is important to have people have a lot of comfort that their information and their transactions will have confidentiality, they will have a strong encryption, and they will be secure. Cybersecurity is vital for this space. We've unfortunately had a number of cybersecurity fails. One of the challenges in any cryptocurrencies, there's a built-in bug bounty if someone is able to break a smart contract. So it's very important for the success of this to keep cybersecurity in mind and give people the confidence that they are able to use these systems in a way that will keep their self safe. And I would say, I guess, most of the important thing, or one of the more important things, is usability, is to make it so that it's available, usable by all comers, that it doesn't require people to have specialized equipment, specialized knowledge, but are able to be empowered wherever they are, whoever they are, and take full advantage of the digital world.
So for me, and I guess I can shill Alliance now, the idea of building a founder community like we're doing at Alliance, accelerating the next generation of founders that are building in this space, I think is critically important because our organization, Alliance, and the Blockchain Association, this technology is incredibly powerful. It can be used for authoritarian purposes if it goes the wrong way, or it can be used for expanding freedom and liberty and all the great things that we talked about here. And organizations like Alliance and Blockchain Association really want to make sure that it happens in the freedom and liberty enhancing way and not in the other direction. So I think that getting in a room, getting together with the young founders, accomplished founders, helping them build these technologies, helping them see the future, and steering it in that particular direction, I think is a critically important life's work. I think I'd be doing something very different if I didn't think this technology was so actively under attack by governments, by bad actors. I think that there's an incredible risk here that this technology develops in the wrong way, or it's outright blocked, which I think would really stifle one of our last true hopes for native privacy-preserving technology that we control, as opposed to relying on others that might be more powerful than us to give us our rights. So that's really what animates me.
Thank you.
What they said. I'll say that for me, on a meta level, when we look at our world today, the inequality of our world is a feature, not a bug, of the money that we've created. And that's what motivates me, is actually knowing that with interest-bearing money, with debt-backed money, that inequality is a feature and inequality will persist, and yet there is so much human capital out there that has so much more to give to actually improve our world and improve our world in making it a more fair, kind, livable place for the billions that we share this planet with. So on a meta level, that's really what motivates me. Professionally, I believe that this is also not only is this technology key to privacy and freedom, but I also believe it's the pathway through which we can hold corporations to account in terms of contributing to stakeholder capitalism and creating a real impetus for corporations around the world to contribute to supporting these efforts. One of the things that I think is interesting is that we've talked about public networks. Well, corporations themselves can do a great deal to contribute to supporting the growth and the flourishing of public networks. We see this in crypto today. There are many private companies that hire and fund Bitcoin or Ethereum developers that contribute to the open source network. eToro itself sponsored the initial build of Good Dollar, which is open source code that's designed to be used by anyone and adapted by anyone. And so, there's a lot of ESG, and corporate social responsibility has actually never been more controversial, but yet at the same time, we can't, I believe that making the connection between corporate funds, corporate donations, and contributions to public networks, which are inherently designed to be lasting and public goods, is critical to closing the gap between how do we pay for this stuff.
And real quickly, what motivates me is to get a digital identity that travels with you through Web3 and the metaverse into every person's hand. We just crossed the line of 3 million. I know 3 million isn't the globe yet, but that's my vision. I do believe that owning your own identity and owning your own data is so important. And my second motivation is to make sure that it is inclusive. And so if you haven't joined something like Unstoppable Women of Web3 and the Metaverse, I would love for you as a company to join us, because only when we get that inclusivity will we really be able to innovate and really be able to take off. So I'm hoping like our founders are going to have a lot of women in them, our coders are going to have a lot of women in them. We're going to have a lot of diversity throughout.
Thank you all so much. This was such an awesome conversation, and I appreciate you all being here, and thank you to everybody who listened. Hopefully you all are as fired up as I am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.